Besides the mediums in great duty, the case here, with the ordinary communications of mediums with average beings for the individual and small communal evolutions, is actually similar to the previous one. The difference is that there is no control mechanism here. That is, the being does not inspect if the vibration it sent to the medium was transmitted correctly or not. It only suffices with sending its influences to the higher consciousness of the medium. It is not interested with how the medium receives or conveys these. However, the being giving the communiqué is controlled by superior beings. Influences coming from that being to the higher consciousness of the medium are subjected to the mechanism of initiator. Guiding and propulsive influences, which we previously explained in the topic of influences, are filtered through a few stations, according to its distance to the medium, and land in the higher consciousness field of the medium, and communicates to it. Influences, from the higher consciousness via the channel of the unconscious, go to the center to which the organs to convey these influences to the surroundings are subject, that is, to the center for speaking. At the same time, they are reflected to the consciousness center as well. If the impressions belonging to the images wished to be evoked and required to come from the subconscious, are not in a state to be reflected to the comprehension as they are taken from the subconscious via the channel of the unconscious, these vibrations are not of a quality to activate the cells belonging to the comprehension molecules of the consciousness. Then, man cannot comprehend them. In this case, again, automatic communication is in question. However, since each center is always under the command and management of the consciousness center, no center can be activated without commands from it. The consciousness center receives these influences, which do not alert comprehension molecules in it, and sends the necessary commands to the required centers according to these influences. Sometimes, incoming influences are of a quality to evoke the images belonging to the meanings they carry at comprehension cells of the consciousness, that is, they are in a state suitable to the vibrations of comprehension molecules of the consciousness center, in order to activate them. Then, the medium goes into action by knowing the deed he does. Nevertheless, in most of the communiqués, this activity occurs with comprehension. As it is seen here, the consciousness center, unlike the previous group, is not subject to an inspection mechanism to give due command to the execution center. Meanings coming from the being are executed by the center without inspecting their correctness. Because of this, in this kind of communications, situations, besides mixing of impressions taken from the unconscious in between the communiqués, as well as impressions taken from the subconscious and not subjecting them to inspection, may sometimes result in alteration in the meaning of the communiqués, their degeneration, or conveying the opposite meaning the being wishes to express. Frequent or rare occurrences of such situations depend on the capabilities of the mediums, degree of power of the being sending the communiqué, and the conditions of the structure and the milieu. 4. It should be remembered that, during the communiqué, comprehending or automatic thoughts, wishes of the sitters or assistants in the session influence the mediums, even in spite of those assistants. And this happens as such. This influence can never go to the higher consciousness field of the medium and cannot alter the communiqués, but by utilizing the channel of unconscious, which is open to the consciousness at that time, it can easily influence the consciousness field and may bring about more or less indistinctness. This indistinctness, which emerges in the consciousness, according to the intensity and variety of these influences coming from the surroundings, may hinder the flux of influences coming from the higher consciousness. 4. The contact field of the unconscious that carries the influences coming from the higher consciousness and of the consciousness becomes more or less occupied by the influences coming from the surroundings. In this case, centers begin to make the medium say strange words, by these mixed and confusing influences they receive from, on the one hand, the subconscious, and on the other, from indistinct consciousness. All of these states are not purposeless and in vain, but are states arranged by the beings in duty, for the increase of refining experiences of the mediums and others around them. Here, there are innumerable factors such as development of capabilities and attention of the assistants and the mediums, testing their good or ill intentions, and measuring their degrees of courage, resolution, and perseverance through their behaviors in the face of the consequent misapprehensions. For the automatic communication to be understood well, we see it as useful to summarily repeat its mechanism. Every vibration arriving at the brain must certainly be reflected to the consciousness center, either directly or via other channels. 4. Because the being is connected to the human body via the consciousness center, the center governing the brain, nervous system, and consequently the whole body is the consciousness center. Therefore, without its approval, nothing can be done in the organism. Otherwise, that is, if every incoming influence attempts to use the centers directly, without appealing to the consciousness, this situation not only attacks against the freedom of the being but also disturbs the wholeness of the organism, and a situation emerges such as disintegration of this wholeness, which is not in accordance with the necessities, and the order is disturbed. There is no power mighty enough in universe to disturb the divine order. Therefore, every external influence that wishes to do this or that activity must definitely act without disturbing the wholeness of the organism. For this, every influence entering there must go through the approval of the consciousness. So, influences sent from outside and executed by the organism, whether comprehended or not, must definitely go through the approval of the consciousness center. However, influences arriving at mediums at high, average and low levels, although they are reflected to the consciousness, are sometimes not of a quality to activate the comprehension molecules belonging to the meanings they carry, as we have said, in the consciousness. Influences of this character end up only having the related centers to do necessary deeds via the consciousness center, without human comprehension involved. That is, the consciousness center, without human comprehension involved, gives positive or negative commands to the required execution centers about the putting into effect of that deed, under the influences arriving at it. Those centers, according to this command, reflect the influences that are arriving at them from above, and that have acquired their meanings by going through various channels to the surroundings, by translating them into their communiqué tools. And this happens as such. As we said above, consciousness is 7/8 of the being which is connected to the brain. Therefore, consciousness is also contained within the whole of the being. It only occupies the molecule ensembles in a certain part of the brain cells pertaining to human life. These molecules exist in groups. As some of these groups constitute human comprehension, some other parts do the deeds belonging to the conduction of the brain centers, according to commands from the being. Therefore, the comprehension mentioned here only belongs to the human brain, or more correctly, a comprehension belonging to the human. This should not be mistaken for the comprehension occurring in the essence being. So, comprehension not occurring in the comprehension cells of the consciousness center does not mean that influences arriving at the consciousness center will not be comprehended in the essence being either. Because of this, an event which is automatic, which remains unknown by the comprehension molecules in the consciousness center and consequently by mankind, has been comprehended by the essence being. Such is the automatic character. Influences from outside arriving at the brain and waiting certainly for the commands of the consciousness center, in order to be executed by the executing centers, either interest or do not interest the comprehension cells of the molecule groups constituting the consciousness center, and this depends on necessities. If they interest them, consciousness center does its activity upon other centers with comprehension, that is, it knows the deeds it does while it is in its human state. If the incoming influences do not interest the comprehension molecules, consciousness center renders its administrator duty as usual, but its human state is not aware of the deeds it does, whereas higher consciousness of the being is aware of those deeds with its own comprehension, and it governs the consciousness center with this comprehension of its. So, here, from another angle, we fortify the meaning of the knowledge we previously gave about that human comprehension is not same with the comprehension of the essence being. There are various reasons for the bestowing of automatic communiqués. For example, a sublime being wants to hide from the medium some of the meanings of the communiqué it wishes to convey. Therefore, it sends its influences to the consciousness center without touching the comprehension cells in the consciousness center. Then, the consciousness center approves it automatically, without knowing its meaning, and commands the center for speaking to act accordingly. It should be remembered that impressions in the consciousness actually comes from knowledge in the unconscious. However, because the consciousness is always in connection with the unconscious, especially in the trance state, not evoking impressions in the consciousness means that the knowledge to be consigned from the unconscious to centers has not activated the quantitative values of the consciousness up to a degree to cause its awakening. If these values are sent to the comprehension molecules in the consciousness to a sufficient degree, through the motions occurred in it, impressions begin to be evoked, and the consciousness begins to act with comprehension. Likewise, as happens in some backward communications, regardless of the state of the being, a simple being, as completely free of the condition of whether these impressions are evoked or not in the consciousness center, also acts automatically, and only expects the consciousness to put into effect the required influence in the centers. Therefore, impressions belonging to the meanings expressed by those influences are again not evoked in the consciousness, and the consciousness acts automatically. Sometimes, the nature of the medium and state of the consciousness center are not suitable for impressions to be evoked in the consciousness center by incoming influences. The consciousness center commands the related centers upon only the impression evoked in the consciousness about the execution of the required deed. It has them to do these deeds. And sometimes, incoming influences are not in a state to evoke these impressions. In short, because of various similar reasons, without evoking impressions belonging to the meanings of the incoming influences in the consciousness center works only with impressions about the execution of those. In that case, the character of automatic mediumship emerges. We repeat that all of these situations occur under the control of sublime beings, and in accordance with sublime necessities and imperatives. There is nothing arbitrary and random at all.